voice of reason for the Middle East.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
Hello and welcome to Middle East Now. Here are tonight's top stories. Out of law in a historic first, Jordan bans Muslim Brotherhood and its ideology. Illusion of Kashmiri calm shattered. The deadly attack on tourists threatens to shake stability. And no longer overshadowed on the eve of Holocaust Memorial Day, putting the spotlight on the horrors of Farhood in Iraq. We begin here in Israel. More than a year and a half after he was kidnapped in front of his wife and daughters, Hamas publishing this very evening additional documentation showing hostage Omri Miran, the first sign of life since July 2024. It comes as negotiations are still up in the air. The Israeli Security Cabinet is set to convene yet again tomorrow night to make some decisions on the ground campaign in the Gaza Strip in a bid to further pressure Hamas, which is being slammed today from an unexpected direction. Perhaps for all the latest, we want to cross now live to our 24 News senior correspondent, Balir Sladin. Balir, thank you so very much for joining us. So bring us the latest on the talks and this message, this fresh message from Omri Miran, a sign of life.
Yes, maybe let's start with the Omri Miran. Right after the publishing of the video, we are here beside the tent where members of Nahal Oz kibbutz are here sitting every single day, and they told us that they are very happy, of course, to see him alive and well, but they are, of course, sad in this day to not be able to hug him and bring him back. They are calling on the government, of course, to make every effort to bring him back as soon as possible. The family of Omri Miran did not authorize until now the publishing of the video, but they are saying that for the fact that he is still there for over a year and a half, and in this memorial day for the Holocaust, the government is still not making the effort to bring him back. This is a shame. That's what the family is saying. Now, to go to the current proposal, let's say, I wouldn't say talks, because there are no delegations for now that are negotiating over the current proposal. Hamas delegation is set to arrive in Cairo with a new proposal that talks about an old and new offer, let's say, the long-term truce, what they call Hudna, something that we can even trace before October 7th, and even the founder of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, has talked about such Hudna before. They want ceasefire for 5 years in order to regroup, of course, rearm, and during that time they will release the hostages as soon as the truce begins. That's, of course, with guarantees from the international community and from the mediators that Israel will not be able to resume the war. Israeli officials are saying that this is absolutely not acceptable because, of course, after 5 years they will not just end their what they call a struggle against Israel. They would just resume it as they will be able to carry out attacks again against Israel.
Of course, a proposal that only solidifies Hamas' potential role, something, of course, Israel vehemently opposes. But let's address now the address of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. What did he say exactly? We understand, Balir, it was not scripted. He did not intend to say that or to say what he said in the manner he did, but at last very, very harsh criticism directed towards Hamas.
Yes, definitely. Well, I would just take this to the internal political rivalry between Hamas and Fatah in the Palestinians, among the Palestinians themselves. But today he mentioned the release of the hostages. He's saying that if Hamas does that, then Israel will not have an excuse to continue its war in Gaza. Of course, he's not saying that because he sees the issue of the hostages as a humanitarian issue that needs to be addressed, but rather he thinks or he knows that once Hamas releases the hostages on Israel terms, of course, that means that they are defeated. That's another way of him to maybe clear for the Palestinian people that the armed struggle, as they call it, against Israel is not working. It's actually just bringing war, death and destruction to Gaza, and the right way is their own way, the political resistance, as they call it.
Yes, clear-cut criticism on behalf of the Palestinian president directed at Hamas. I-24 News senior correspondent Balir Sladin, thank you so very much for this. And we want to welcome now here in studio Lieutenant Colonel the Reserve Dr. Doron Avital, former commander of the Special Forces of the IDF. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Avital, for joining us. Well, let's try to expand our conversation a bit, because we do know that the Israeli Security Cabinet is set to convene yet again tomorrow, but it all comes against the backdrop of the phone call between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump, who's also met this very week the Qatari Prime Minister, who's visiting Washington. Connect the dots for us.
Yeah, well, the map is a little bit wide. Of course, we can go back to the Iranian thing, but in the Palestinian-Gaza conflict, for sure, I think the Trump administration wants to see how this process converges into a hostage deal. I don't think they want to see Israel taking over Gaza and putting a military rule over Gaza. I don't think this is in the card for the American administration. I don't think it's in our card. So it means that we have to think practically and pragmatically how to convert to some end game to Gaza. And maybe in this context, Mansour Abbas was made this unscripted
remark. Yeah.
Exactly, because what it says basically, we know.
Perhaps not so unscripted, you're saying.
Yeah, maybe not unscripted, exactly. So that in the end, whoever would rule Gaza, there would have to be some participation of the Palestinian Authority. And this is where the Israeli government is a little bit locked, because if the Palestinian Authority participates in ruling Gaza, then what does it mean? We continue the trajectory, the Oslo trajectory. We have Macron, for example, that wants to declare.
No Abbas, no Hamas. We know
exactly.
this slogan.
Exactly. So Israel is a little bit locked, and I think this government is locked, and Netanyahu himself is locked in terms of the decision that he has to take. And then, of course, it will be the issue of the humanitarian assistance that would have to be introduced to Gaza in a week or 2 weeks. Who would do it? So all those trajectories, they lead to time of decision for the Israeli government and in general for the region.
Yes, and as we will, of course, expand our conversation on the perhaps or potentially expanding ground campaign in the Gaza Strip, Gaza Strip, rather. We do want to shift our focus now to this. Two female soldiers were recently seriously wounded in the Gaza Strip. They were part of course, of a growing number of women taking part in taking their place, rather, on the front line. And this is our report from our sister Hebrew channel here at I-24 News, reporter Eden Benchlush. Here's a report.
In the midst of the fighting in Gaza, 2 female combatants from an IDF drone collection unit were recently wounded by RPG fire at their vehicle in Beit Hanun. These injuries are part of the bigger story, that of female soldiers who are risking their lives on the front lines.
I think that with every entry into Gaza, when you go inside, you get excited, you get scared, you calm yourself and you understand that there's a moment of some kind, something about what you're doing, that where you're going, it's full of meaning.
I can personally say that fear didn't propel me when you're inside, and that it's something that you only really realize when you get out. Inside, it's really about the mission and your team.
I-24 News spoke with Reserve Sergeant Major Melanie Lemberski, formerly of the Cheetah Battalion, currently doing reserve duty in the Bethlehem area. Melanie is a prominent voice from the field, and she talks about the complex fighting in one of the most dangerous places in Gaza, Khan Yunis.
I've been doing reserve duty since the beginning of the war. I did the first 3 months, and now we're back for another round of combat. More than 100 days, that's for sure. We've stopped counting.
Reservist Yuval Mualim is a company sergeant major at the base set up in Rafia that supplies the fighters with their logistical needs.
One morning I woke up and suddenly I saw this soldier who was almost sleepwalking. And I simply looked at him and asked, "Do you need something? Can I help you?" Because in the end, they somehow always come to me. And he said to me, "I need food. My friend was killed an hour ago. And we haven't eaten since this morning." I just stopped, took him and simply hugged him. And he just cried on my shoulder.
Over time, the fighters also got used to the long hair sticking out from under the helmets. Melanie and her team conducted extensive sweeps of Khan Yunis, breaking into homes with increasing force and dealing with real threats. They also searched for female Hamas fighters, something male IDF soldiers can't do.
I'll speak for the fighters. For us, at the beginning, it was really more crazy because it's something we really wanted to do, and we really hoped. We hoped like kids, because it wasn't something that was really real to us. But as soon as they called us in, we were happy to be a part of it.
There was an incoming missile alert, and my commander... I remember he just threw me on the floor, covered my body with his. And then you heard the boom, boom, boom. And you heard wounded and killed. And it's all chaos, and people are sometimes shell-shocked and unresponsive. And you sometimes scream for someone to bring a tourniquet. Let's put it this way, I'm here through a miracle. My life has changed.
Just like their male counterparts, the female soldiers also have a strong camaraderie.
In that area, we were the only force of female soldiers. It was like something very different, let's say. But after 2 days, everyone really understood their role in the fighting. And the interaction was amazing, and the work was just extraordinary.
The heavy price that women pay was made clear again with the injuries of the female soldiers of the drone collection unit. And of course, not forgetting First Sergeant Agam Naim, a paramedic and fighter in the 401st Brigade who fell last September, the first female soldier to fall in battle during the operations in the Gaza Strip.
I think a woman brings to a war zone, a battle zone. When a woman suddenly asks, "Wait a minute, how are you?" There's more. It's more comfortable to come and talk and share and put your head down and maybe make a request, while with a male friend it would be less comfortable. I felt like a desert flower, let's call it that.
The female fighters are much more than just trailblazers. They set a boundary, they cross it. They set a new boundary and then cross that too. They show what power is, what the meaning of a mission is. The new female warriors find themselves in a new line, the line of fire.
Back here in the studio with Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve, Dr. Doron Avital. Lieutenant Colonel Avital, I do want us to begin our conversation, especially after the report we've just seen on women combat soldiers. It comes, of course, in stark contrast to the lack of progress when we're talking about the draft bill, the so-called draft bill that is set to settle the long-standing dispute over ultra-Orthodox drafting. But beforehand, let's address the current situation on the ground campaign in the Gaza Strip. Where are we heading?
Yeah, at the moment, the new decision is that we're actually taking standing within the territory, within the Strip. Then, of course, we expose ourselves to those guerrilla attacks, the sorts of which we saw. What we saw until now is rarely Hamas attacks. We don't see a real resistance. I'm not sure what do they do, whether they prepare, whether they have not enough capacity, but we've seen this scenario in which we lost a soldier and a few of those women soldiers got wounded.
To an extent, the asymmetrical warfare is in the benefit of
always. Asymmetrical warfare is all the time the benefits of the guerrilla, of the asymmetrical side of the. So basically, we have to make a decision. We always insist about momentum in the battlefield. So momentum is when you have a clear vision. Where do you go? Where is the end game? For example, we always explain everywhere that if we want to conquer Gaza, and put a military regime, we can do it in 24 hours. We just have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And then fast movement, take strongholds, and then you start the process of controlling Gaza. This is not what the decision Israel took. And then we find something in between.
And
under the premise.
Sitting on the fence, quite literally, in our case,
exactly.
is simply not an option. Well,
and under the premise that this is used in order to create enough pressure to release the hostages. The question whether this formula works.
Hamas to the negotiation table. All right, and while this decision on the future of the ground operation in the Gaza Strip is up in the air, the decision or lack thereof over the drafting of ultra-Orthodox students is also not yet made. All right, we want to move to that now, ahead of another round of talks between the United States and Iran on potentially a new nuclear deal. Iran's foreign minister is in China today. Both sides are looking to involve global powers in what could become a major diplomatic shift. Here's the latest.
Negotiations between the U.S. and Iran over a new nuclear deal are in full swing, with both sides aiming to bring the world on board for what could mark a significant diplomatic breakthrough. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi was in China on Wednesday, saying Beijing must stay fully informed about the talks with Washington. In a rare English-language statement to reporters in Beijing, he said progress was being made.
Talks with the United States is going in the right direction. It's still too soon to judge. We are cautiously optimistic, and if Americans continue to stay in a constructive way and avoid any unrealistic, undoable demands, I am confident that we can get to somewhere and we can conclude a good deal at the end.
Araghchi also stressed that Russia, a close ally, should be fully involved in the process. On Tuesday, the Sultan of Oman, the main mediator in the talks, met with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is also expected to again meet Putin later this week. While details of the discussions with Moscow remain unclear, there has been speculation that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium could be transferred to Russia as part of the deal. The U.S. is reportedly demanding that Iran remove its advanced centrifuges, but Tehran has firmly rejected this condition. Israel has its own demands: the destruction of all Iranian nuclear facilities. However, U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly blocked Israeli plans for airstrikes, choosing diplomacy for now. Witkoff and Araghchi are set to meet again on Saturday in Oman for a third round of talks, and the world is watching closely.
And speaking of China, President Xi and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev signing a comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries, with China reiterating its support for Baku in safeguarding its national sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. This according to the official statement there, including a commitment to back Azerbaijan in the UN. So for more, we want to turn now to Mr. Vusal Gulayev, Policy Advisor at AIR Center. Thank you so very much for joining us. So what are your main takeaways? How significant is that agreement?
Oh, thank you very much for having me. And the recent state visit of President Ilham Aliyev to the People's Republic of China is far more than a ceremonial diplomatic gesture. Because it signifies a strategic turning point with profound geopolitical and economic implications for the broader Eurasian region. And as we all see that it happens against a backdrop of shifting global power dynamics and intensifying regional realignments.
Right.
The visit elevated bilateral relations to an unprecedented level, the signing of joint statement on establishment of comprehensive strategic partnership relations, as you mentioned. And this, of course, marked a formal upgrade in ties, positioning Azerbaijan not only as a key partner in China's external relations, but also as an emerging geopolitical hub in part of the Eurasia.
Yeah, and you know, we keep forgetting that in geopolitics, Sometimes the politics are inferior to geography, and in this respect, Azerbaijan is, of course, a key position. But before we get to that, she is also, President Xi, that is also citing three evil forces: terrorism, extremism, and separatism. Translate that to us into Azerbaijani interest, if you will.
Exactly. That's a good point. From Azerbaijan's perspective, the timing and substance of this strategic alignment with China are particularly significant because following the recent geopolitical recalibrations in the South Caucasus, especially in the aftermath of the Second Karabakh War in 2020, and the evolving trilateral dynamics involving Russia, Turkey, and Iran, Baku has been seeking to diversify its foreign policy, reduce vulnerability to regional volatility, and enhance its agency on a global stage, and enhancing ties with China, a rising global superpower with enduring influence in Central Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. Serves multiple objectives for Azerbaijan, like gaining political capital, expanding economic opportunities, and reinforcing Azerbaijan's position as a reliable transit hub.
And perhaps an example for that we can find in the role Baku is at least trying to play when we're talking about mediation efforts between Turkey and Israel, for that matters, over what is currently unfolding in Syria. But before we conclude, and as we've already mentioned, Azerbaijan's geopolitical standpoint obviously much sought after. Are we expecting a balancing act on behalf of other superpowers after this deal was signed with China?
Of course, as global geopolitics enter a new era defined by multi-alignment and diversified power centers, the Azerbaijan-China partnership stands as a model of pragmatic and forward-thinking diplomacy. And it also demonstrates how mid-sized powers like Azerbaijan can leverage geography, vision, and strategic partnership to elevate their global profile and influence. And of course, this visit's legacy will likely be seen in the years to come, not just in corridors of trade or economy and diplomacy, but also in a new foundations for regional order and sustainable cooperation.
Yes, a key moment for Azerbaijan to reposition itself perhaps here in the region. Vusal Gulayev, thank you so very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. We want to head now to Tel Aviv, where one of many Holocaust memorial gatherings are taking place tonight, dubbed Memory Salons, where Holocaust survivors are sharing firsthand their stories, their experiences in a very intimate environment. Our Joe Brown is there. Joe, such unique events.
It's such unique events, and not only are they so rare, they're so important, and we need to maintain this, keeping the memories of the Holocaust alive, because unfortunately the final generation, some of the youngest people who survived the Holocaust, are unfortunately passing away. The median age for current Holocaust survivors is 87. A recent study came out that said that within the next decade, around about 70% of Holocaust survivors will pass away. So it's important for these events, such as this one, Zikron Basalon in Tel Aviv, to try and keep these memories alive, especially for a younger generation, with the influence of the internet and various conspiracy theories that make people think that the Holocaust either was exaggerated or didn't happen. So this event in particular, Zikron Basalon, which literally translates as memories in a living room. This is a closed setting in which either Holocaust survivors or descendants of Holocaust survivors will speak to an audience about their family stories, and then afterwards have a short discussion, a Q&A session. This one here is in Lillenblum 7. This is a place where it's frequented by new immigrants who come here to learn Hebrew. So this specific talk will be directed towards English speakers, and the speaker here is Ilil Israeli, who is a a comedian, an actress here in Israel, and her grandfather, Yaakov Libkovich, he survived Auschwitz. He was born in Poland, and after the horrors of the Holocaust, he got a Zionist fire within him, and he decided to make Aliyah and fight for the Palmach, the military organization who fought in Israel's War of Independence. And subsequently he stayed here, and up until he died in 2018, it was him who was doing these talks in Zikron Basalon. So now that's been passed down to his granddaughter Ilil, and we'll have around about a dozen or a couple dozen people here today to listen to her. And the State of Israel is wanting to promote this as much as possible. If you look at the app Waze, the Israeli-founded app, you can actually see where these events are taking place. This is not just a singular event that's happening here in Lilienblum 7 in Tel Aviv. This is something that's happening all over the city. The municipality has put on multiple of these events to try and reach as many people as possible. This was founded in 2011, and since then there have been millions of people both in Israel and abroad who've sat here to listen to the horrors and to make sure that, as awful as they were, the worst atrocities for the Jewish people, the memory of it will stay alive.
Yes, keeping the memory alive and remembering and not forgetting, not the same thing. So these events are keeping the memory alive quite literally with this direct connection between the audience and the survivors, now second and third generations already. Joe Brown, thank you so very much for this very special evening here. In Israel, we will, of course, bring you the official, the National Holocaust Day ceremony later on this evening, live from Yad Vashem. But now we want to fast forward to nowadays. Israel's military is turning to cutting-edge technology in its operations against Hamas. The robotic, an autonomous unnamed bulldozer, unmanned rather, is now playing a key role on the battlefield, helping reduce risks to soldiers while carrying out dangerous tasks in Gaza, replacing tasks that perhaps human soldiers should have been doing instead. So here's more on this robotic innovation that is shaping or reshaping modern warfare.
At first glance, there is nothing unusual about the bulky bulldozer turning up soil at a testing site in central Israel. But as it pulled closer, it became clear. The driver's cabin is eerily empty. This is the robdozer, a fortified engineering vehicle manned remotely and in this case operated from a military expo halfway across the globe in Alabama. Army engineers and military experts say that the robdozer, the robotic version of Caterpillar's D9 bulldozer, is the future of automated combat. The Israeli military has used D9 for years to carry out frontline tasks like troweling roads for advancing troops, removing rubble and flattening terrain. But since war in Gaza broke out in October 2023 and later in Lebanon, the Israeli military has increasingly deployed this robotic version in a bid to enhance its field operations and reduce the risks to its troops. The idea is to eliminate the person from the cockpit of the dozer, says Rani Avni, whose team at the state-owned Israel Aerospace Industries developed the robdozer.
It can do autonomous missions, not just driving from point A to point B, but also the combat engineering task can be done autonomously. For example, building a defense wall can be done just by pressing two buttons, and it will do the back and forth activity until it builds in the right height and the right length of the defense wall. It will build it by itself.
During the Gaza war, the military has increasingly opted for the unmanned version, which can carry out a full range of tasks, even better than a human.
It can do a route clearing, penetrate exactly the level of penetration that it requires by the operators, and keep the blade position into the ground exactly as needed.
While such vehicles and other systems are currently operated by humans, future versions could be autonomous, raising ethical and legal concerns over the uncharted future of warfare being shaped by the Israeli military in the Gaza war. The Israeli army has allegedly been using robotic tools for over a decade, but in very small numbers. Now it is being used in large-scale warfare. The IDF is likely the first force to use remote-controlled combat machinery in an active war zone. But beyond ethical and legal drawbacks to such advanced technology, there is also the need for an overriding human presence to make decisions, particularly in unusual situations. Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel that sparked the Gaza war was a disastrous example for that, when Palestinian terrorists breached the high-security border.
I think that October 7th showed us that you can build a wall that may cost $1 billion, but if you will not do any patrol on the border, then someone will infiltrate your country. So we must take note of the opportunities and of the risks of technology, but at the same time, we cannot avoid reality, we cannot avoid the era in which we live.
Israeli experts agree that artificial intelligence is rapidly integrating into all areas of life, and the security field is no exception. As AI continues to shape modern warfare, it is clear that this technology is becoming an indispensable tool for the Israeli military in the ongoing conflict.
And now to what is becoming more and more prevalent and might mark a significant shift here in the Middle East: crackdowns and arrests, and now a first ever ban, all signal recalibration vis-a-vis extremist Islamic forces here in the region. Both Jordan and Lebanon spearheading this trend. So how far will they go? We're back here in studio with the Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve, Dr. Dorona Vital. A huge development. We really cannot underestimate the importance of Jordanian authorities outlawing the Muslim Brotherhood and its ideology. This is according to what was announced today. All connected, obviously. Again, a major shift in the public actions of the Hashemite kingdom.
Yeah, sure, an important shift. I mean, we have to. The Jordan kingdom had a history in fighting extremism in different forms, and we shouldn't forget that even when the PLO was conducting its raids, not the Muslim Brotherhood, but the old PLO before in the 70s, right, conducting those raids on Israel, then there was the Black September and the whole story of blocking them and pushing them to Lebanon. So this is a very major development. We have also to remember, in the context of the peace process in general in our region, to go back to Egypt and the assassination of Sadat, the leader of Egypt that was willing and pushed forward for a peace with Israel. So the Muslim Brotherhoods are in the end enemies to any possible future of reconciliation in our area. So this is a very important
countering any sovereign Arab regime.
Exactly. Also,
yeah,
because there's this vision of a grand Islamic territory. So I think we should, of course, embrace it, but this would mean for Israel also to rethink who are the moderate players in the region that we want to play with.
You want to weaken someone,
exactly,
you need to think of who you're
You have to reconnect with the other forces. And in this context, of course, the two pillars, Egypt and Jordan, but of course also to reconsider what do we do with the Palestinian Authority, whatever renewed, new, not corrupted Palestinian Authority would emerge in the coming few years, and it's connected to the Gaza issue, because we can't let the situation move forward. You don't move it forward, you'll have against those organizations growing up, because hatred together with extreme ideology can cause those terrible events like the 7th of October.
And albeit extremely tempting to connect the Israeli interest to every single development here in the region, impossible not to be honest. But we're seeing similar moves pursued by the new administration in Lebanon, and we do know that Beirut contacted Amman right after this wave of arrest last week of this terror cell. And again, you know, we were talking about it in the context of Azerbaijan earlier in the broadcast. The mere geographical position, when we were talking about Jordan, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, the perfect hub to expand terrorism.
First of all, it's interesting, your emphasis on geography, because I think if you talk to people in the 90s about geopolitics, they would say...
Politics is what counts, not geography.
Politics, and you have technology, you have the depth of distance, nothing works.
Citizens of the world.
Exactly, but it turns out that since the twins and forward, and for sure in the last few years, we understand that geopolitics is back, strategy is back, and people are trying to think how to connect the dots, as you say. And I think one of the nicest terms that comes to mind in this context, you mentioned Azerbaijan, is those corridors. Everywhere there's a corridor corridor between Pakistan to China, a corridor between Azerbaijan, and of course the corridor in our area, the IMEC, the famous India, Middle East, Israel, Europe corridor, which is very important for the future of this area. So I think geopolitics, strategy, we have to rethink forward and try to pave the new corridors of the future. Let's
yes.
put it this way.
And bottom line, if Iran stays in Jordan, it's a threat. If Iran goes, it means that Israel is alone with the Arab issue and the Palestinian
And it's
issue.
important to know that our northern campaign was very successful with this respect by really disentangling us from Iran. But then
at
we are
this
back.
point in time, let's be modest in our predictions. All right. Speaking of tense areas and geopolitics, turning now to the aftermath of the deadly attack in Kashmir, a situation that could easily deteriorate further. Suspected rebels killed at least 26 tourists in the picturesque tourist resort of Pahalgam, the deadliest such attack in a quarter century, raising fears, of course, of an escalation in India-Pakistan tensions. So for more, we want to turn now to journalist Ratnadeep Chakraborty. Thank you so very much for joining us to get a clear image on what is currently unfolding. So what do we know? What's the latest? Please bring us up to speed before we discuss the ramifications.
Yeah. So you rightly mentioned that there were 26 people who have been killed and 17 injured. And the terrorists carried out the attack in a very Hamas-style operation, similar to what we have seen in the atrocities of October 7. They arrived with body cameras, started shooting civilians at close range. I saw videos circulating online where people were shot at point-blank range on their head. Reports say that the terrorists made people strip and pick victims based on their faith. Only Hindu civilians were selected and shot dead. I saw an interview where a woman who was visiting Kashmir with her husband from Karnataka begged to be killed after seeing her own husband shot. And the terrorists replied, no, we want to keep you alive so that you can go and tell your prime minister what we did here. And these were 4 attackers from the Resistance Front, which is an offshoot of Pakistan's Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is designated as a terror group even by Israel because they carried out attacks in the Habat house in Mumbai 2611 where Jews were killed. And this comes at a time last month, or in February rather, 2025, these were people who were cozying up with Hamas leaders. And they said Yahya Sinwar was their hero, and they want to exactly replicate what Yahya Sinwar did in Israel.
Mr. Chakraborty, you're putting an emphasis on the tactics here, not just on the mere decision to attack. And obviously, there was a very clear message those terrorists sought to convey.
Exactly. This also happened at a time when U.S. President J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance was visiting India. And our Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia. They wanted this to be shown to the world. Last week itself, Pakistan's army chief, who is also very involved in this attack, General Asim Munir, said that Kashmir is basically Pakistan's jugular vein. And it is believed to be one of those threats which led to directly to this attack.
So Mr. Chakraborty, we do hear Pakistan saying, "Don't blame us. We're not behind it." But how has the Indian government responded so far? What are we to see next?
Well, Pakistan. Pakistan is notorious for all these things. You found Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, and they didn't know anything about it. Pakistan will say all these things. It is with the help of Pakistan's military chief, this has happened. And the Indian government has strongly retaliated. First with the diplomatic measure, the Prime Minister cut short his Saudi Arabia trip short. He chaired a cabinet security meeting, out of which a lot of diplomatic decisions were taken. The first was the Indus Water Treaty, which is an agreement between India and Pakistan for water distribution. And India has decided to temporarily suspend it. And Pakistan depends heavily on the water from that system. So that's one of the things. The next is closing down the Atari-Wagah border, which is a crucial point for trade and communication between the two countries. And 3 is declaring 3 military attaché who are Pakistan military attaché who are based out of India as persona non grata. So these are the diplomatic things that have been done. On the military front, India will retaliate. Our blood is not cheap. this is something which will not go unnoticed. There's already manhunt for the 4 terrorists, and a military retaliation will be similar to what it has been done before. Maybe an airstrike or a ground operation, similar to what we have done in 2016 and 2019 after the attacks. But let's be very clear about this. Our real enemy, it's like the octopus. It's that the tentacles of the octopus are the terrorists. The real enemy here is General Asim Munir. It's the octopus head. So any action which is not directed towards Pakistan Army goes to vain.
You know, if we change the names of the players, of the entities, we could perhaps easily incorporate or apply, rather, your explanation on other conflicts that we're familiar with, and I will put it diplomatically. Mr. Chakraborty, before we thank you for your time, it, of course, all happened in a certain political climate in India. What are we hearing domestically? What are the calls that we're hearing inside India?
Domestically, we all support the decision that will be taken by the government and the army. We are all rallying behind the government and the army to take a strong and decisive operation, maybe, towards Pakistan. And out of all the people in the world, I'm sure Israelis will understand, because we all, India and Israel, share a common enemy, radical Islamic extremists. And as long as we don't defeat them, they will keep attacking us. And that's something we all have come to realize.
Journalist Ratnadeep Chakraborty, thank you so very much for your time, for your insight, clearing the clutter on what is currently unfolding and what are we to expect next. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Moving on to this now, a 6.3 magnitude earthquake has rocked Istanbul and surrounding areas in Turkey. President Erdogan says search efforts are still underway, but that there were no problems so far, end quote. Turkey is crossed by 2 significant fault lines, and earthquakes are quite frequent there. The last tremor to be felt in Istanbul was in mid-November, when a quake caused a brief panic, but no damage or injuries. But magnitude 7.8 in 2023, we all remember, destroyed hundreds of thousands of buildings and left more than 53,000 people dead. Of course, we all remember that massive earthquake. All right, moving now to this, because most Holocaust commemorations center around Nazi atrocities in Europe, and pogroms against Jews here in the Middle East that happen at the very same time are often overshadowed, but not anymore.
Jews lived in the land of Babylon for more than 2,500 years. In the capital, Baghdad, the Jewish minority enjoyed more than 2 millennia of peaceful coexistence. By 1941, the approximately 150,000 Iraqi Jews played active roles in many aspects of Iraqi life, including farming, banking, commerce, and the government bureaucracy. Their situation changed dramatically exactly 75 years ago. On June 1, 1941, mob violence against Baghdad Jews known as the Farhood broke out. Historians are divided on what specific event was the trigger. They, however, agree that the word Farhood itself originates from the Farsi language in the days of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman soldiers did not receive their payments before holidays and raided markets and stores. The literary translation of Farhood means plenty of stores. 1,500 stores and homes were looted during the Farhood. The exact number of victims is uncertain. During the 2 days of violence, rioters killed around 180 Jews and a couple of hundred were wounded. The Israeli-based Babylonian Heritage Museum maintains that another 600 unidentified victims were buried in a mass grave.
And we remember this dark event in a very, very dark period of Jewish history, the period of the Second World War.
The Farhood was the beginning of what became a broad Nazi-Arab alliance during the Holocaust. It was both Nazi-inspired and encouraged by a prominent Arab leader, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. He escaped from the British Mandate of Palestine and arrived in Iraq in October 1939.
There were all too many people in the Middle East, Muslims and Arabs, who saw Nazism as something positive, who found inspiration in Hitler.
Civil order was restored after 2 days of violence in the afternoon of June 2nd, when British troops imposed a curfew and shot violators on sight. The monarchist Iraqi government set up a committee of inquiry to investigate the events. The Farhood marked a turning point for Iraq's Jews. Many of them left Iraq following it. Many others sought to stay in Baghdad and fight for better conditions in Iraq itself. They became more active politically by joining the Iraqi Communist Party.
For more, we want to turn now to Sasha Goldstein-Saba, Senior Lecturer on Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Groningen. Thank you so very much for your time at this very special evening here in Israel. And after so many years of somewhat, again, staying in the shadows, awareness to and of the Farhood horrors are becoming more central in Israeli and Western commemoration.
Yeah, so I think there is more knowledge today about the Farhood, both within Israel and in Europe and in North America, as people are certainly interested in understanding the diverse histories of Jews in the Middle East and North Africa. With that in mind, of course, in Iraq, it's really only specialists and those who are interested in the history of their country who look to this moment. So it's gaining more attention, but I think that there's more work to be done about people understanding the moment.
So before we talk about people understanding or not enough, let's talk about the events themselves. The modus operandi back then reminded to many the horrific events of October 7th. And of course, we're saying it very carefully, obviously many differences, but similar methods of rampaging, of raping, of massacring. Do you as a scholar see those similarities?
So I think this is a case as a historian where we say history doesn't repeat itself.
Right.
Obviously, there are things we don't know about the Farhood, as the video you showed before mentions, but the Farhood was very much an outbreak of violence that targeted Jews, but it was also a proxy because Jews were seen as being aligned with the British. And October 7th was very different in that way, of course. Similarly, I think there's October 7th was well planned by Hamas, and that has been heavily documented. There's not documentation that the Farhood was planned in the same way. And so I think there are truly differences there as well. Also, one was really a breakdown in the rule of law. The other one was a coordinated terrorist attack. So I think we need to be careful. Obviously, both were traumatic,
of course,
but different, not exactly the same.
Yeah, speaking of October 7th and awareness, let's just connect the dots here. The eldest of hostages, Shlomo Mansour, may his memory be a blessing, who was murdered in Hamas captivity, was himself a Farhood survivor. So speaking of, again, this raising awareness, it's noteworthy. But if there is one message, one lesson that should be learned from the events of the Farhood, what would it be?
So I think the Farhood is an example of a breakdown of the rule of law and both a willingness to ignore the safety of Jews, but also a willingness of many Iraqis who wanted to protect Jews. And I think when we think about the Farhood, we need to remember that Jews, like all individuals, deserve to be safe.
Right.
And that we really need to strive to build societies where everybody can be safe, and that Jews, like anyone else, deserve to be safe in the same way. And so we see in the Farhood that actually order was restored and the violence that was inflicted on the Jewish population was recognized by the state. The level of violence may not have been commensurate, but it was. And Jewish life continued in Iraq after that. And I think that's an example of the resilience of the Jewish community as well. But it really speaks to this need to live in a society where we remain committed to human rights, where we remain committed to safety. And those are certainly challenges about how to create societies where people feel safe. And that, I think, is when I think about the Farhood, that this historic, important Iraqi community was specifically targeted.
Right.
Their place within Iraqi society was very much challenged, but that also they overcame this, and the dissolution of the community was actually significantly later. And we see Jews who left Iraq after the Farhood in 1941 who would return, and then, of course, would leave again definitively between 1948 and 1951.
The Jewish message is very often a universal message, the canary in the coal mine. Sasha Goldstein-Saba, Senior Lecturer on Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Groningen. Thank you so very much for this, again, very special, emotional evening here in Israel. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Lieutenant Air Colonel Dr. Doron Avital, we're all connected to the stories of the Holocaust. This is the history of our ancestors, and you have a special connection to...
No, because there was the mentioning, in the Palestinian movement in the 30s, there was, of course, there was the Mufti, and this is the leader who really took side with the Nazis, and I don't want to put this as a sort of a claim that covers all Palestinian and Israel, because Israeli, our Palestinian and Jewish settlers, they really coexisted for many years. My family, from my mother's side, is from 19th century in the old city of Jerusalem, and they lived in this very famous neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, for years with their Arab friends. But the family story, it goes back to the beautiful book that my mother wrote, The Spirit of Sheikh Jarrah, that my grandfather actually was working at the Mufti's house, painting the house as a construction guy, and then the Mufti made this terrible parade in the old city, celebrating Nazi ideology, and this was a moment of a breakdown for my grandfather, who said he cursed him in Arabic and just left the construction.
Not working for...
Yeah, wouldn't work for the Mufti anymore, and to his death, he said the Mufti still owes him a bit of money for the work.
Till this very day,
exactly. So, but it's important to note now, going on a higher level, the Holocaust is really a unique, singular event in the history, and we shouldn't confuse it. For example, I don't like the allusion in the 7th of October to the Holocaust. We have an army, we have a military, we have a state. It's important to know this. It's a different circumstances. We failed on the 7th of October protecting our citizens. We wouldn't fail again, I hope. But we shouldn't put the two events side by side, for sure, in this day, in this remembering day of the Holocaust.
Yes, atrocities and horrors have different natures. They don't have to be similar in order
it's important in terms of the attitude.
To shake and shape.
We shouldn't forget that we are a strong, independent state that can protect itself.
Indeed. Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve, Dr. Doron Avital, thank you so very much, as always, for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you. And still on topic, after the Holocaust Memorial Ceremony at Yad Vashem tonight, 8 p.m. local time, our channel will air The Uprising, a special I-24 News project for Holocaust Memorial Day. This documentary combines archive footage and AI simulations to highlight the less familiar aspects of the doomed Jewish uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. It remains a tragic symbol of armed resistance during the Holocaust. I-24 News journalist Maya Buenos brings us the heroes of those events and the underground groups in the ghetto who fought not only for their own survival, but for the entire Jewish people.
גם אצי וגם אייל, שניהם מתכננים אירוע מאוד גדול לקראת ה-22 בינואר 43.
מה היה אותו אירוע שתכננו לא נדע. הרי 4 ימים קודם לכן נכנסו בהפתעה גרמנים לגטו, ופרק חדש נכתב בדם.
ברגע שגרמנים חודרים לגטו, כל מי שיכול מתחבא.
מי שיכול מתחבא, ובמקביל חברי השומר הצעיר מצטרפים לצעדת היהודים המובלים על ידי הנאצים לאומשלג פלץ. הם מפוזרים בין השורות, על כל אחד לבחור לו מטרה. בהינתן האות, הם יפעלו.
ממה שאנחנו יודעים, הרימון הראשון שנזרק, הוא בעצם נזרק על ידי נערה שהייתה אז בת 17.
הייתה זאת מרגלית לנדאו, חברת השומר הצעיר.
Moving on to this now, as tributes flooded in from across the globe after the death of Pope Francis. The Israeli government shared and then deleted a social media post offering condolences over the death of the Pope without saying why, sparking much speculation. So what could be the reason? Here's more.
As mourners around the world gathered to celebrate the life of the late Pope Francis Wednesday, in Israel, Cardinal Pierbattista Pizzaballa, head Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and possible heir, led a mass at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where, according to Christian tradition, Jesus was buried. Pope Francis was remembered by experts on Jewish-Catholic relations for his work to continue the path of his predecessors on ties with Jewish leaders. At the same time, some noted that ties took a turn after the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. The verified X account at Israel, which is linked to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, had posted on Monday a message on the social media platform that read, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis, may his memory be a blessing." The post was then taken down hours later, and Israeli diplomatic missions were reportedly ordered to take down any similar posts and not to sign condolence books in Vatican embassies. Officials at the Foreign Ministry were quoted as saying that the Pope had made statements against Israel and that the message had been published in error. Pope Francis, who died on Monday, was usually careful during his 12-year pontificate about taking sides in conflicts, condemning the growth of anti-Semitic groups, while also speaking by phone with Gaza's Christian community during the war.
For more than 1 year and a half, daily, he called us to ask for peace, to pray for peace, and to give the blessing for all Gazan people and for all the Palestinians.
But Francis suggested last November that the global community should study whether Israel's military campaign in Gaza constitutes a genocide of the Palestinian people, and in January called the humanitarian situation in Gaza shameful, prompting criticism from Rome's chief rabbi, who accused Francis of selective indignation. Francis's body was taken to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday, where worshippers can pay their final respects, and a funeral will take place on Saturday. Many expect the next pope to come from Latin America or even Africa, but at the same time, there could be a push for a more traditionalist leader after internal fights over controversial statements and innovations during Francis's tenure.
The funeral this Saturday. Now, the official national memorial ceremony for Holocaust Remembrance Day will begin shortly at the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem. We will be broadcasting it live here on I-24 News. You can see live images on your screen right now. So stay tuned right after the break.
How do you get your news? Who do you trust to bring you the facts? And what's happening behind the scenes? To give you the entire story in this complicated, constantly changing region, we're based in the Middle East. Top stories with our team of journalists in the field, newsmakers, and experts. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Facts matter. Be the voice of reason.
Introducing the brand new I-24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News Video On Demand app today.
welcome to this special edition of I-24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek, live in Tel Aviv as Israelis across the country prepare for the start of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. The whole country comes to a standstill to honor and remember the 6 million Jewish lives lost in the Holocaust. It's an incredibly powerful day every year, but especially as the country still grieves from October 7th. The saying "never again" has a new meaning to it. Never again is now. Ceremonies begin this evening all over the country, and we'll be taking the state ceremony live from Yad Vashem, Israel's official Holocaust memorial and museum, which you see on your screen right now. The central theme this year is Out of the Depths, the anguish of liberation and rebirth, marking 80 years since the defeat of Nazi Germany. 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. 80 years since the end of World War II. And nearly 77 years since the founding of the Jewish state. Israel will mark Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, followed by Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut, next week. But first comes Yom HaShoah. And during these heavy and painful days leading into Memorial Day, I want to remind our viewers of a saying here in Israel. Israel has two Memorial Days. Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, to remind us the cost of having Israel. Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, to remind us the cost of not. Today, we remember the cost of not having a Jewish state. 80 years after World War II, an estimated 123,000 Holocaust survivors currently live here in Israel. Tonight, we hear their stories and honor those who are not with us to share theirs. This ceremony begins any minute now, but first we'll be going to that live. When it does, I'm still joined in studio for the hour of this broadcast with our I-24 News correspondent, Alec Pollard, as well. Alec, any minute now, this emotional, powerful display is going to begin there at Yad Vashem. What should we be expecting during tonight's ceremony?
Right, so this is the main ceremony with the participation of all of the government figures, such as the Prime Minister, but all across the country, you have Holocaust memorial ceremonies in every town and city. In many of the schools, they have their own ceremonies. So it's something that is commemorated all across the country. And there are also those figures who were chosen to light the beacon on Holocaust Memorial Day, who are themselves Holocaust survivors, each with an incredible survival story from across different parts of Europe and even North Africa as well, Tunisia. And their ages between 88 and 96. And this is a testament to the time that has passed, and the survivors, those that are still with us, are getting older and older. And
80 years since World War II. Yet still, these survivors are here to tell their stories. As you mentioned, 123,000, but that's already a much smaller number than we're living here in Israel just last year. And so every year it is just more and more important, it seems, to hear their stories, because one can't help but wonder how many of these stories and how many of these years we have to hear from them themselves.
Definitely. There's nothing like listening to a Holocaust survivor straight on from that person himself, compared to seeing a film or reading about it. When you have one of those people who went through that in his lifetime telling you, it's a very powerful experience. And it definitely raises questions of what this day will look like when those Holocaust survivors are no longer with us. I think we still have quite a few years with them yet, but the numbers are dwindling, and there's that extra responsibility to preserve the stories and the legacy of the Holocaust. We've gone a long distance from the events. It's kind of a known fact at this point that in Israel, the Remembrance Day for the soldiers and the victims of terror tends to elicit more emotion than Holocaust Memorial Day, because those events are less personal for a lot of the people, especially the younger people in Israel today. Practically every person in Israel knows someone who was a soldier, who died in duty, or was a civilian who was killed in some type of attack.
Especially now, since October 7th.
Especially now. But even before October 7th, and now in a stronger way, it's very, very personal for people. So it's a question also of what can be done to kind of keep this day as having the proper impact and the learning of the historical lessons that it has, and to keep young people in particular engaged and connected to Holocaust Memorial Day, and to appreciate it and to remember this terrible tragedy.
It's one of these difficult dilemmas that even Yad Vashem continues to face, how to captivate much of the younger minds. But something that's so interesting here in Israel, we're watching the state ceremony right now that we will be taking live just any moment. But all across the country, you mentioned these other ceremonies, and there's also something called Zikaron B'Salon, where people host in their living rooms Holocaust survivors to share in more of an intimate setting. And it really speaks to the personal level that people have here in Israel. We've been covering some of that all evening, but we're going to go live to the ceremony now. This is the Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony, the state ceremony from Yad Vashem. Okay, so some of these preparations still ongoing. We're going to be taking that, but it seems they're still finishing up the final touches there. Before we do go to this ceremony, Alec, I was just asking about Zikaron B'Salon, a very intimate experience and a special experience here throughout the entire country. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, it's an initiative to enable people in a more intimate setting to meet some of these Holocaust survivors, or to meet them at all, just a venue where they can do so. And it's also, it shows how far this country has moved and come in that regard, because some people don't know that early on in Israel's history, actually Holocaust survivors were quite silent about their experience. They were either traumatized or they had some type of shame, and it was just something that wasn't really dredged up. People didn't want to dredge it up until the years passed, and there became that understanding that a lot of stories could be lost if the survivors don't speak out. And they began to speak out. Also, more films began to be made about the subject and so forth. And that was the beginning of this process, from kind of hiding it and not talking about it, and people not talking about it, to doing every possible effort in order to hear the survivors, their stories, and their testimonies.
Especially, we talked about the Yom HaShoah, which leads into then Yom HaZikaron next week, Memorial Day, as well as Independence Day. And we'll be covering this throughout the week here on I-24 News, especially this interesting turnover that really does really show the Israeli spirit that goes straight from Memorial Day into Independence Day, one of the saddest days of the year, into a celebratory day, celebrating the state of Israel, 77 years this year as well. And you talk about some of these Holocaust survivors, the difficulties with sharing some of their pain and memory. I think I'm hearing right now, we'll get back to this conversation in just a moment, but we do have the ceremony that is beginning at Yad Vashem now. Take a listen.
Distinguished audience, The President of the State of Israel and his wife, the Prime Minister and his wife, Speaker of the Knesset and his spouse, and Acting Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and his wife, accompanied by Chairman of Yad Vashem Council and Chairman of Yad Vashem, are now entering. You are kindly requested to rise.
המשמר יחטיף את נשקו, אחטף, שק. המשמר יציג את נשקו, הצק, שק. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו, אחטף, שק.
His Excellency, President of the State of Israel and his wife, the Prime Minister and his wife, Speaker of the Knesset and his spouse, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and his wife, Honorable Chief Rabbis of Israel, the 10th President of the State of Israel, Chairman of Yad Vashem Council, Chairman of Yad Vashem, Chairwoman of the Center of Holocaust Survivors Organizations in Israel, Doyen of the Diplomatic Corps serving in Israel, Holocaust survivors from Israel and overseas, distinguished audience, one and all. To mark the opening of the National Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Day, the national flag will be lowered to half-mast.
המשמר יחטיף את נשקו, אחטף, שק. For the lighting of the remembrance torch, I am honored to invite Chairman of the Yad Vashem Council, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. דגל, שק. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו, אחטף, שק. המשמר יציג את נשקו, הצק, שק. המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
נא לשבת.
You may be seated.
ורעייתו הצטרפו אלינו, העיכוב.
The Prime Minister and his wife just joined us. They were slightly delayed due to security matters. As we open the ceremony, we would like to say a prayer for the swift return of the hostages, our brothers and sisters held in captivity in Gaza, for the safety of our soldiers fighting on the borders of our land, and for the quick and full recovery of those who have been wounded in battle. We embrace the bereaved families who have lost their loved ones. Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Day 2025 is titled Out of the Depth, the Anguish of Liberation and Rebirth, marking 80 years since the defeat of Nazi Germany. On May 9, 1945, when Nazi Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allied forces, jubilation spread throughout the world. Military parades and public celebrations took place throughout the European continent, yet one nation did not take part in the general euphoria: the Jewish people. For them, victory had come too late. The Day of Liberation, the one for which Jews had longed throughout the years of the Holocaust, was for the most part a day of crisis and emptiness, a feeling of overwhelming loneliness as the sheer scale of the destruction was grasped on both a personal and communal level. Many of the Jewish survivors of the camps and death marches, hiding places, forests, and escape routes were in severely deteriorated physical and emotional condition. With the advent of liberation, probing questions arose for the survivors. Where could they feel secure? Who had survived somehow from their families and communities? How would they be able to go back to living a normal life, to build homes and families? And where? How should the legacy of the murder be preserved and commemorated? How would the perpetrators of the heinous crime be brought to justice? Were the survivors to seek vengeance? The activities of the survivors in the DP camps were a powerful expression of the survivors' efforts to return to life, despite the grief and extensive hardships. Making Aliyah was a pivotal stage in the survivors' rehabilitation. In numerous ways, Holocaust survivors contributed to building a better world for themselves and for future generations. Many of them took part in building a better place for themselves and future generations, leaving an indelible mark on the shaping of the land and the fabric of Israeli society. The President of the State of Israel, Mr. Isaac Herzog. In recent years, I've acquired a habit to host Holocaust survivors in the President's house. I meet them almost every week. They come to Jerusalem dressed in their best clothes, some of them nearing their 90s. Others are even close to 100 years old. Sometimes it's difficult for them to walk. Others, it's difficult for them to breathe. Usually they are accompanied by family members, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even great-great-grandchildren. I speak with them, and I'm exposed to these inconceivable life stories, and all of a sudden I found myself saying, sometimes quietly just to myself, and sometimes out loud to them. Here, here, you've won, we've won. They sit in my office, the office of the President of the State of Israel, these cherished people who had witnessed the most terrible atrocities. Some of them also lost people, lost relatives in Israel's wars. Surprisingly or not surprisingly, all of them convey belief, optimism, a fierce spirit, and all of them have one request, one demand. We remember the darkest of times, they tell me, the worst of actions, our loved ones who were massacred and tortured and died with great torment. We remember a sense of loneliness one cannot describe in words, without a personal home, without a national home. And now we've been privileged with this amazing country that was built with blood, sweat, and oh so many tears. And then they finish with this cry. They say, Mr. President, please, we beg, we demand. The division among us is terrible. Please unite our people. My brothers and sisters, citizens of the State of Israel, as a person serving the mouth for those Holocaust survivors and for so many Israelis who are apprehensive because of the polarized reality we're living in, let us all fight together and let us turn these days into 10 days of holiness. From this day until Independence Day, let it be a formative historic era towards a period that is entirely about responsibility, national responsibility. May we bring together the hearts. Let us not allow the social networks and all those who are experts in polarizing and being divisive to destroy us from inside. May we mourn together. May we miss together. May we feel pain together. And yes, even today, may we stand high together. Let us unite in a common cry and prayer for the immediate return of all the hostages from the hands of Hamas murderers, both the ones who are dead and the ones who are alive. May we commit together to do everything in our power, not to rest until they all come back, all of them, until the very last one. I am speaking from this platform to our brothers, the hostages. Maybe some of them can hear us. I'd like to tell you, an entire people, an entire nation is with you, misses you. An entire nation feels pain and torment, and their soul is scorched, and they know there shall not be no relief and no healing until all of you return home. I'd like to ask us to pray together for the success and well-being of all IDF soldiers and all the security forces and homeland security forces, and for the recovery of all those who have been wounded, whether in soul or in body. May we embrace together the beloved bereaved families who keep crying out time and again, now is the time to be worthy of them together. Our dearly beloved Holocaust survivors, you are heroes. Distinguished audience, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife, Speaker of the Knesset Amir Ohana and his spouse, President of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Yitzhak Amit and his wife, Chief Rabbis, Rabbi Kalman Ber and the Rishon LeZion, Rabbi David Yosef, the 10th President of the State of Israel, Ruvi Rivlin, and his spouse, heads of the national institutions, the director of the Shin Bet of the Mossad, the chief of general staff, the chief police commissioner, and the heads of the fire services, Mayor of Jerusalem, Moshe Leon, chairman of the Council of Yad Vashem, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, chairman of Yad Vashem, Mr. Danny Dayan and his wife, ambassadors and diplomatic representatives. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, welcome. And I think all the following speakers are now exempt from reading the entire list of dignitaries. Citizens of Israel, 80 years after the victory of the Allies, we convene this evening once again, remember the victims and simultaneously celebrating the victory, the triumph of light over darkness, of morality over evil, the spirit of the Jewish spirit over the monstrous hatred. But this day, Holocaust Martyrs Memorial Day is not a day in which we only look back. I speak here not only 80 years after the Holocaust, but also 18 months after the greatest massacre that our nation has experienced since the Holocaust. While we are still scarred and bleeding, filled with fear and concern, and therefore I wish to elevate this holy day as a day in which our nation looks unto its future as it internalizes the most important lesson. Just like back then, 80 years ago, we shall overcome this time again. It is part of our DNA, our deepest DNA as a nation, because the eternity of Israel shall not lie for eternity. On the left arm of Tommy Schwartz, they tattooed in Auschwitz the number B14295. He was born in Nitra, Slovakia, and he was only 6 years old, a first grader when the war broke out. His parents, who felt this murderous anti-Semitic ring of fire closing upon them, they tried to escape with Tommy and his two brothers to hide, but in vain. Tommy and his family had witnessed the atrocities on all of its stages, the decrees that took away human and civil rights from Jews, violence towards the Jews, the systematic deportation to the camps, and the mass murder of their loved ones, their friends and their relatives. The long arm of the Nazi extermination machine ultimately reached the Schwartz family as well. They were sent to a camp in Slovakia where the family, from there they were taken to Auschwitz in train carts for animals without water or food, amongst all the filth and horror near the bodies of those who did not survive this terrible journey. Young Tommy was separated from his family in Auschwitz and found himself all alone, only 9 years old, there in the middle of the terrible death camp. It was his role to watch over 10 other starving children who were in pain. In a matter of only 3 months, 9 out of the 10 children, Tommy's children, he himself was merely a child, had perished. On January 27, 1945, the 13th of the Jewish month of Shvat, the Red Army forces reached Auschwitz, and when they entered the camp, they found the last remnants of entire families, the last vestiges of glorious communities that had completely perished. Among them was Tommy, only 10.5 years old. In this famous picture taken by the liberators, he appears near the fence, the last kid on the left. I chose life, said Tommy, about what he had felt at that moment, the moment of liberation from the Nazi monster. He made Aliyah, he started a family and became an admired educator. It is our privilege to have him with us this evening. This year, in January, when the world marked the 80th liberation day, the 80th year of liberation of Auschwitz, he said that he will not be able to come because he chose to mark the victory over the Nazi beast on a naval ship called Victory. Next to him was his granddaughter, captain, who was the deputy captain of the ship. Exactly 80 years after his liberation, a lonely, freezing, hungry child who had been through the worst inferno, Tommy Schwartz Shacham, could now tell his own personal story of victory on a battleship, on an Israeli battleship, 80 years to the liberation. And I stand here giving you my testimony, he said to the soldiers of the IDF, and declared there is no greater victory than this. Approximately 2,000 kilometers area lines separate between Nitra, Slovakia, and Benghazi, Libya, but there as well in North Africa, the terrible Holocaust had its victims. Yosef Levi was but a young boy who was deported with his family from their home in Benghazi to the infamous Jado concentration camp. From there, they were deported to Italy, and then he was taken from there to the death camp, Bergen-Belsen, in Germany. In Bergen-Belsen, one of the prisoners learned that Yosef never celebrated his bar mitzvah. He gave him a talit, a prayer shawl, and as death was hovering above them, he celebrated in a moving ceremony. After the war, he made Aliyah and enlisted with a Palmach. In the War of Independence, he fought in the most difficult battles, opening the road to Jerusalem that was under siege. The prayer shawl he received in Bergen-Belsen, he kept until his very last day as a symbol of his faith and hope and victory. When he was asked how did he survive, he answered, the talit, the prayer shawl, reminded me who I was, where I came from, and what the future, and the fact that there is a future for me. With the liberation of the Jado camp, one of the greatest sages of Jerba, Rabbi Shaul Sheli Kikes, wrote a piyut, a poem that corresponds with Psalms, and a nation was born, praise God, but with a slight change. Instead of a nation is born, praise God, he said, praise God, a nation is born. Even in this destroyed world, Rabbi Sheli identified the ability to choose again and to be reborn and choose a future and victory. And he called hallelujah, hallelujah to the nation that came from death to life, that was resurrected. Hallelujah to the nation that even in the midst of terrible suffering and loss, always kept holding on to hope, to redemption, to the belief that victory shall come. My brothers and sisters, tomorrow I will lead on behalf of the State of Israel the March of the Living in Auschwitz for the memory of those who had perished and for those who have survived, and for the future. 80 years after the victory of the Allies and the liberation of the camp, I will march there as the president of the Jewish and Democratic State of Israel. I will walk through the gates of this terrible hell from which chimneys our massacred brothers and sisters rose to the sky. And near me there will be families of Holocaust survivors, freed hostages and their families. And as I still, just like all of us, I am still under the impression of that terrible, terrible fate we had all suffered on that day a year and a half ago, because even though we all know very well that nothing can be compared to the scope and scale and method of the Holocaust, when one hears the terrible testimonies from the heart of that terrible hell of October 7th and the images and stories of the hostages, those who came from the valley of death of the tunnels in Gaza, and those whose horrific documentation is shown to us again. Of course, one cannot see all that and not be shocked. The blood of our brethren calls to us from underground. We must bring them back home urgently, but not just the impression of the atrocities from the past and the present is what I see in front of me, but also that profound hope and belief that we have inherited from you, Holocaust survivors, the faith and the hope that come together in one word, hallelujah. Hallelujah, like that great triumph of Joseph and the Talit. Hallelujah, just like that victory of Tommy with his granddaughter, who's an officer, a naval officer. Hallelujah, for the rebirth of the Jewish people in its land. And I say right now, in this holy of holiest moments, without any reservations, if we've managed to rise from the greatest depth in the history of mankind, then we will always succeed in doing so. The journey will not be easy, but it shall happen. But there's one condition and one condition only, to do that together. These are days of very difficult strife, and the vast majority of the people are crying out as hard as they can, enough with the hatred, enough with the polarity. History will be unforgiving to those who shall react irresponsibly and break us up from within. Those who led to the collapse of our amazing country, our beloved Jewish democratic country that rose from the ashes of the terrible Holocaust. Our common building after that great crisis is a historic, tremendous mission, which is not the responsibility of one person, one community, or one camp. It is the responsibility of all of us as a nation, as a society, as individuals. I'd like to say to you, the people of Israel and our brethren in the diaspora. We shall overcome this time as well. We shall rise to every challenge and overcome every enemy, and we will prove together time and again the eternity of the Jewish people shall not lie.
האומנם עוד יבואו ימים בסליחה ובחסד ותלכי בשדה ותלכי בו כהלך התם ומחשוף כף רגלך ילטף בעלי האספסת או שלפי שיבולים ידקרוך ותמתק דקירתה
ומטר ישיגך בעדת טיפותיו הדופקת על כתפייך חזך צווארך וראשך ענק ותלכי בשדה הרטוב וירחב בך השקט כאור בשולי ענן ונשמת את ריחו של התלם נשום ורגוע וראית את השמש בראי השלולית הזהור
ופשוטים הדברים וחיים ומותר בם לנגוע ומותר לאהוב ומותר לאהוב את תלכי בשדה לבדך לא נצרבת בלהט השרפות בדרכים שסמרו מימה ומידה וביושר לבב שובתי ענווה ונכנעת כאחד הדשאים כאחד האדם
Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu.
המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
אחיי ואחיותיי,
My brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel,
מכובדי נשיא המדינה,
His Excellency, President of the State of Israel, I shall do as you've suggested and will say, distinguished audience, first and foremost, the lighters of the torches, the representatives
של שורדי השואה המופלאים.
of our wonderful Holocaust survivors. You bear on you the scars of the terrible devastation, but you also represent the heroism of the spirit that guarantees our existence. Every year, my wife and I meet with those who light the torches, and every year we are moved anew. Yesterday, we met with the people that we will shortly hear their personal stories. Among them, Professor Aryeh Durst, who's been our friend for decades now, an amazing surgeon at the Hadassah Hospital. But we did not know, Aryeh. We didn't know the hell that you've been through, that as a boy, as a child, you survived that terrible hell and disguised yourself as a Catholic Polish child. You never told us that. But it is important that you and your friends tell the story for the sake of our people, for future generations. You moved us to tears yesterday. And that reminded another moving moment, reminded me and my wife of another moving moment. 3 weeks ago, as part of an important diplomatic visit to Hungary, we stood at the banks of the Danube River, and that place illustrated to me ever so clearly the inconceivable way and how far we've come from Holocaust to resurrection. The memorial site of the shoes was beneath us. What a terrible sight. What a terrible monument. Shoes made of iron attached to the banks of the Danube, a silent testimony to the fate of tens of thousands of Hungarian Jews, men, women, children. They were taken by force to the banks of the river. And there, the terrible collaborators with the Nazis shot them and threw their bodies into the depths of the river. And all that was left of them were the shoes. So next to that monument of the iron shoes, there's a terrible monument as well. Pillars of iron commemorating our loved ones who were killed in the Iron Swords War. My wife and I looked away from there to there and then back again, from the iron shoes to the stickers with the images, the pictures of our heroes, from the reminders of the Holocaust to the Israeli heroes, to the Israeli flags, the yellow ribbons tied around in order to demonstrate to the whole world our commitment to bring back all of our hostages. And when the Kaddish prayer was recited, we bowed our heads in memory of those who had perished in the Holocaust and also in memory of those who were killed in the recent war. And as I bowed my head, I thought to myself about the tremendous change we've achieved over the past 80 years. During the Holocaust, we were like dust carried away by the wind. And it is important to say, and I say this almost every year, we salute from our heart to the heroism of those who rebelled in the camps and the ghettos. Their heroism was a ray of light that pierced the terrible darkness that fell upon us. But it was also the spark of the rebirth that followed. But generally speaking, it is important to say our brothers and sisters, the 6 million, were taken helpless to the pits of death and to the infernos of fire. And today we have a powerful force that protects us, respected by the whole world. We have a country, we have an army, we have security forces, we have amazing soldiers who have a very fierce spirit. I meet them out there in the field, and I'd like to say to you, it is an army of lions. It is the army of victory. Our soldiers represent the power of life in our people, a nation that time and again rise from the abyss and blooms anew. A year and a half after the terrible terror attack of October 7th, we are systematically crushing the ring of suffocation of the axis of evil. We do not forget, not even for one moment, the terrible atrocities committed by our enemies. At the beginning of the war, the Chancellor of Germany visited Israel, Chancellor Schulz, and after having seen the atrocities, and he also saw the video, and he said to me, he said, the Hamas murderers are exactly like the Nazis. And indeed, they are exactly like the Nazis. Just like Hitler and Haman, they wish to kill and destroy all of the Jews, and they declare about their intention to destroy, to annihilate the state of the Jews. They say so out loud, but it's not going to happen. We are determined to annihilate the monsters of Hamas, these monsters who committed the worst massacre that we've experienced since the Holocaust. There will not be an Islamic Caliphate with an army of terror, not in the south, not in the north, not in Judea and Samaria. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Israel, Holocaust Remembrance Day is an important milestone in our efforts to eradicate those who seek to destroy us, to bring back the hostages, and to anchor our existence in our homeland for generations to come. A year ago, exactly a year ago, I stood in this very same place and I spoke adamantly against those elements in the international community who sought to tie our hands. They warned us that if we enter Rafah, they will impose an arms embargo on Israel. And they also came through with that threat. And I said back then to our ally, the U.S., and all our other counterparts, I said that as the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, the state of the Jewish people that had existed for millennia, the very same nation who had experienced the Holocaust only a few decades ago with these terrible murders, no one will prevent us from defending ourselves. No one will tie our hands. We are going to enter Rafah, I said, because this is a necessary condition for winning the war. And if we need to stand alone, we shall stand alone. If we have to fight with our fingernails, we shall fight with our fingernails. But under no condition whatsoever will we relent from this mission of victory. To my colleagues in the cabinet, I said Israel is not a vassal state. It is not a state that accepts the dictates that risk its existence, because a country like that cannot survive in the tumultuous Middle East. Therefore, no decision, no resolution can prevent us from settling the score with this despicable, terrible barbarians as bad as the Nazis who kidnapped and murdered and raped our loved ones. In Holocaust Memorial Day, exactly a year ago, exactly on that date, did we start our action in Rafah. And indeed, it was a significant turning point in the war. Thanks to the heroism of our amazing soldiers, we managed to take over the Philadelphia route. We killed thousands of terrorists, and we killed the architects of the massacre, Yahya Sinwar, Def, and also Nasrallah from Lebanon. We've created the conditions for the toppling of the Assad regime. We've harmed Iran significantly, and as I promised 2 days after the outbreak of the war, we changed the face of the Middle East. Those who feared that after the massacre of October 7th we will face a second Holocaust saw how we turned things completely over. On this Holocaust Remembrance Day, I promise that the military pressure on Hamas will continue. We will completely annihilate all of its capabilities. We will bring back all the hostages. We will triumph over Hamas, and we will prevent Iran from achieving nuclear weapons. We will fight the zealot regimes threatening the entire world. We shall fight forcefully against those regimes threatening the whole world. And to do so on time, that is the main lesson learned from the Holocaust. That is also the main lesson that I learned from my father, Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu of blessed memory. He was a witness to the weakness and the groveling of the Western world as the Nazis rose to power. In 1936, when Hitler rose to power, when he was only 23 years old, my father wrote, "If anti-Semitism spreads, it will risk the existence of Jews everywhere." With a Holocaust that is at the cusp of the Jewish people. I hear that they say that nobody predicted the Holocaust. We can quash anti-Semitism if we prove that it doesn't target only the Jews. We must convince others that Hitler's onslaught on German Jews is an attack on the entire human society. And today, I say to you, the regime in Iran, the regime of horrors, is a threat to the fate and the existence, not just of our own future, but the fate and the future of all mankind. This will be the outcome if he achieves nuclear arms. The battle between us and the empire of terror in Iran will determine the fate of all free societies. If, God forbid, Israel loses this war, the Western countries are next in turn. The wave of zealots will wash upon all of them, and it will happen much more quickly than they think. But Israel will not lose. It will not give in, and it will not surrender. That is my mission as the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. That is the mission of all of us, the entire Israeli society. We will continue to constantly protect and defend ourselves, and we shall remain strong. And I am saying all that because what is the value value of beautiful words about the triumph of enlightenedness over barbarism, if at the moment of truth you are not willing to fight and you give in to barbarism, we will never give in. Victory demands resilience. Thanks to resilience and cohesion, the cohesion of all of us, of you, citizens of Israel, we've already achieved such tremendous achievements. And thanks to their resilience, there will be more achievements until we reach victory. Distinguished audience, our dear Holocaust survivors, between the pictures of the memorial pictures and the stickers of those who were killed in battle, like the stickers I saw at the banks of the Danube, the picture of an armored corps officer, Eitan Fish, stood out. His family originally comes from Hungary. He was killed in battle in the Gaza Strip. Alongside the picture commemorating him, there are 3 words written. I heard you, you're right, I'll improve. And this way, with succinctness, out of respect to others, this is how he treated his comrades and commanders in the IDF. 5 generations ago, his relative, Albert Fish, was a soldier in World War I as an officer in the Austro-Hungarian army. And then after the war, Albert understood, and he understood that very quickly, where the anti-Semitic winds were heading in bleeding Europe. So he decided to make Aliyah. Many of his family members did not do so, and they had been perished in the Holocaust. Others, miraculously, managed to survive the Holocaust. Nushi, Eitan Fish's grandmother, was sent with her 3 sisters to Auschwitz. And with great strength of spirit that is difficult to comprehend, all 4 sisters had been saved, had survived, and upon the establishment of the State of Israel, they finally reached this country. And ever since, there is one message conveyed from one generation to the next in the Fish family. Raise your head in view of annihilation, persecution, troubles. Raise your head, say the noble parents of Eitan, David and Chaya, following the fall of their courageous son in action. Raise your head, say 5 generations of rebirth and heroism, all the way from the Austro-Hungarian army to the Israel Defense Forces here in Jerusalem, which is filled with light. We all raise our heads. We shall stand up upright, and we will rise to the challenges ahead. We shall believe in the just of our path, and let us say, together we stand, together we fight, and God willing, together we will win.
ישנם ימים ללא מרגוע, בם לא אמצא לי נחמה, ומוכרחה אני לנגוע בעשבים באדמה, לפסוע אותה הדרך בתוך בריחה הקרקומים, ולהיות כל כך אחרת ולפרוח ערב הגשמים. רק תפילה עשה אוהלי שהשמש תעבור עליי ותראה לי שוב את משעולי. או אלי, אלי, רק תפילה עשה שהשמש תעבור עליי ותיקח אותי אל המסע. ואם אשוב אל זאת הארץ, ואם אפסע שוב בדרכים, האם כקדם יכירוני האנשים והפרחים? רק תפילה אשא, או אלי אלי, שהשמש תעבור עליי ותראה לי שוב את משעולי. או אלי אלי, רק תפילה אשא, שהשמש תעבור עליי ותיקח אותי אל המסע.
The lighting of the torches. 6 torches will be lit in memory of the 6 million, our brothers and sisters who were murdered by the Nazi Germans and their accomplices, and in honor of the Holocaust survivors who reclaimed their lives and joined the national effort to build and establish the State of Israel and became key partners in the preservation of the memory of the Holocaust and its inculcation to future generations. The lighters of the 6 torches will be accompanied by their family members. The first torch will be lit by Aryeh Durst, Lviv, Poland.
אני נולדתי בלבוב, אבא שלי היה רופא נשים, ואימא שלי הייתה עקרת בית. המעמד שלנו היה גבוה, גם כלכלית וגם חברתית. בלילה נכנסו לבית שלנו קצינים רוסים, לקחו את אבא שלי מביתנו והפכו אותו לרופא בצבא האדום. דאגתי לאבא שלי, לא ידעתי לאן הוא הולך, ונפרד ממני, מאמא, והוא הלך. די מהר הגרמנים התחילו לעשות אקציה, ולמזלנו עוזרת אוקראינית הסכימה לשמור עלינו בזמן האקציות ולתת לנו אפשרות להיות אצלה במרצה בבית שלה. אח שלי היה קטן, ולכן עוזרת החליטה לשמור עליו בבית שלה. באחת האקציות שהיו, הגיעו הגרמנים ולקחו את האח שלי, ומאז לא שמענו ממנו עד היום. אמא שלי הצליחה להשיג תעודות זהות מזויפות, ואנחנו בתור פולנים לא יהודים נסענו לוורשה. היום אני מבין שאני הייתי בעצם שחקן. אני כל הזמן שיחקתי תפקיד של נוצרי. הבנתי שאם אני לא אשחק את התפקיד הזה, אז זה הסוף. אמא שלי הבינה שמצב לא טוב, ואז החליטה לברוח משם. יום אחד שמענו טנקים, אבל אלה היו טנקים של הרוסים. וכמובן שכבר הבנו שזה סוף המלחמה. זו הרגשה טובה מאוד, הייתה לנו הרגשה מצוינת. הסוכנות הביאו אותנו לארץ. אני זוכר את הרגעים שנפגשנו עם אבא. הוא חיבק איתי ואת אמא שלי, והמפגש היה מאוד מרגש. והחיים נפתחו מחדש. כשגרנו עם אבא שלי אמר שאני חייב ללכת לבית ספר. והייתי צריך להיכנס לכיתה ו' לפי הגיל. אני פגשתי את המנהל הזה אמר לאבא שלי, הוא לא יודע עברית, לא יודע גם מתמטיקה, הוא לא יודע, יש בעיה. אבא שלי סידר לי מורה פרטי, לימדה אותי את כל הלימודים של בית ספר עממי, כולל שפה עברית. כשהגעתי לכיתה ו' כבר הייתי ילד רגיל מן המניין. סיימתי תיכון בהצלחה והלכתי ללמוד רפואה. והייתי רופא בגולני. אני זוכר שבמלחמת יום הכיפורים הגיעו אלינו פצועים רבים, הייתי צריך לטפל בהם והצלנו הרבה חיים. בזמן שהייתי בצבא היה אירוע שקרה באותה תקופה שזיכה אותי בצל"ש. ב-1972 הקמתי את היחידה המאורגנת הראשונה שהשתלה בבית חולים הדסה. קיבלתי גם פרופסורה בכירורגיה. אז בתקופה הזאת הפכתי למנהל המערך הכירורגי בהדסה. היום אני נשוי ויש לי 3 ילדים ו8 נכדים. טוב, זה הישגים גדולים אני חושב, אבל אני מאוד שמח בחלקי.
תעלה המסור.
Let the torch be lit.
משואה שנייה.
The second torch will be lit by Monica Barzel, born Daniel, Berlin, Germany.
אני נולדתי בבית חולים של היהודים בברלין. אבא שלי עזבה את המשפחה שהייתי בת 1.5 שנתיים בערך. אמא שלי הייתה אחראית על הכלכלה והיא הייתה כאילו אבא של המשפחה, וסבתא הייתה אמא של המשפחה. סבתא שלי הייתה אישה מאוד מאוד טובה, היא הייתה החברה הכי טובה שלי, ותמיד עשינו את הכל יחד. לאט לאט התחילו חוקים נגד היהודים. אז כבר התחילו לתפוס את כל היהודים מהרחובות, כשאמא הלכה לעבודה אני תמיד פחדתי שהיא לא חוזרת. יום אחד לקחו את סבתא שלי למחנה ריכוז, שלחו אותה לטרזין והיא נפטרה שם. סבתא שלי זה היה החיים שלי, והייתי מאוד מאוד עצובה. אמא שלי היה לה מזל גדול שהיא מצאה עבודה בבית חולים של היהודים. בעצם המקום היחידי שהיה מותר לה לעבוד זה היה בבית חולים של היהודים. התחלנו לגור בבית חולים. באיזשהו שלב שמו גדר תיל מסביב לבית חולים והיה גם אסור לצאת מכאן. הנאצים הסתובבו שם כל הזמן וכל חודש שלחו כמה אחיות וכמה רופאים למחנות. היו הרבה אנשים שפתאום נעלמו. ואני מאוד מאוד פחדתי שאולי מישהו לוקח את אמא שלי, וזו הפחד הכי גדולה שלי הייתה. הגרמנים לא נתנו לה מספיק אוכל לאנשים שם, ואנחנו תמיד היינו רעבים. כשהיהודים בברלין התחילו לשמוע קצת מה קורה במחנות, הם מאוד מאוד פחדו, והרבה ניסו להתאבד. אמא שלי, אני שמעתי שהיא דיברה עם חברות שלה, שיש לה כדורים בכיס כדי להתאבד, מספיק בשבילי וגם בשבילה. אני זוכרת שהרוסים הגיעו, מאוד שמחתי, כי גמרו עם הנאצים, אז אפשר לנשום, אפשר לצאת. ואז הגעתי לאנגליה. באנגליה, אחרי הבית ספר, החלטתי להיות רופא שיניים. פגשתי את בעלי שהוא היה מדריך שלי, וזה נגמר בחתונה. ואז באנו ארצה. כשעליתי ארצה, באתי לכפר הנשיא. במלחמת 6 הימים אין לנו רופא שיניים בגליל. אז עבדתי בכפר הנשיא ובעמיעד ובגדות ובמחניים ובאיילת השחר כרופאת שיניים. מילדה מסכנה בתוך בית סוהר כאילו מסביב גדר תיל. היום אני בן אדם מאוד מאוד שמחה בארץ, אז יש תמיד תקווה בחיים. היום יש לי 2 ילדים, 6 נכדים, נינה 1. אני לא יכולה לחשוב על משהו שיותר שמח אותי בכל החיים חוץ מזה.
Let the torch be lit.
The
third torch will be lit by Felix Sorin, Mogilev, Belarus.
Родился я в 1932 году в городе Могилев, Беларуси. Семья у нас была очень дружная, но я помню тот день, когда все это изменилось. Проснулись от грохота взрывов, что немцы напали на Советский Союз. Вечером мы пешком ушли из города, и был полнейший беспорядок на дороге. По дороге шло много-много народу, но среди этих людей я своих родных не увидел. Мне стало страшно тоскливо, страшно, горько. Когда я попал в гетто, мне было всего 9 лет. Ну, а когда мы жили в гетто, то убийство евреев – это была норма фактически. Но самое страшное было, когда проводилась акция, когда были погромы в гетто. Заходили в дома, убивали всех, кто там был. Мы с моим другом Борей убежали из гетто и решили идти на восток. И там нас поймали и отвезли в Минск обратно, в комендатуру. В комендатуре на допросе я уверенно говорил, что я русский, а не еврей. И меня отправили в русский детский дом. Июля 1944 года в Минск вошли советские войска. Большей радости в жизни, наверное, не было. Когда освободили Минск, в детском доме проводили перепись. А потом женщина, которая меня спрашивала, национальность твоя? Я говорю, еврей. Она удивленно посмотрела на меня, а потом сказала, а может оставим, что ты русский? Я сказал, что я еврей. Не надо больше скрывать, что ты еврей, что ты свободный человек, как и все остальные. В 1953 году я встретил Иду. Мы с ней поженились. У нас родились 2 детей, сын и дочь. В 1992 году репатриировались в Израиль. Сейчас у меня 5 внуков. Они меня очень любят, я так думаю. Они ко мне приезжают, не забывают. Самое большое достижение в жизни – это мои дети, внуки и правнуки. Я ими горжусь.
Let the torch be lit. The 4th torch will be lit by Rachel Katz, born Laufman, Antwerp, Belgium.
אני נולדתי בבלגיה, באנטוורפן. אני הבת השנייה. אני זוכרת שהנאצים הגיעו לאנטוורפן. לגן לא הלכתי, כי ליהודים היה אסור ללכת לגן, וגם לבית ספר. אני זוכרת את היום שלקחו את אבא. בכיתי, אמרתי, אבא, אל תלך, אל תלך. אז הוא ענה שהוא חייב ללכת. ויום אחד באו 2 גסטאפו לקחת אותנו. אמא שלי דיברה גרמנית, אמרה לו ככה, אני לא שייכת ליהודים, מה אתה רוצה ממני? סגר את הדלת ולא אמר כלום. פחדנו, כולנו. ואז היא החליטה למסור אותנו למנזר. ובמנזר התייחסו אלינו מאוד יפה. הם ידעו שאנחנו יהודים, הם סיכמו את החיים שלהם. אנחנו היינו במנזר 3 חודשים, גם שם הגרמנים הגיעו, אז הנזירה רצתה להציל אותנו, לקחה אותנו בחזרה לאמא. עברנו לגור באזור של הגויים בשם בידוי, היינו שם עד ספטמבר 44. אבא שלי, כשהוא הגיע לאושוויץ, לצערנו גמרו אותו. נגמרת המלחמה, הלכנו לבית ספר תחכמוני. בגיל 15 התחלתי לעבוד כדי לעזור לאמא שלי. בגיל 20 הגעתי ארצה, ואז התחתנתי. לפני 20 שנה הצטרפתי בהתנדבות לילדי שואה, עמותת יש ומוסד שער מנשה. אנחנו עוזרים לניצולי שואה כמה שאפשר. הרבה ניצולי שואה נשארו פגועי נפש. עד היום הם חיים כאילו אתמול יצאו מאושוויץ. גם היום, בגיל 88, אני עובדת קשה כדי לעזור לכל ניצול שואה. יש לי 2 ילדים, 3 נכדים ו2 נינים, שזה כל עולמי. הרגשה של ניצחון.
תעלה.
Let the torch be lit. The 5th torch will be lit by Arye Reiter, Vaslui, Romania.
נולדתי ברומניה, בעיר וסלוי. יש לי 3 אחים. נולדתי בבית מסורתי, הוריי היה להם מסעדה שעבדו ביחד. בקהילה היהודית כולם שמרו שבת. היה תלמוד תורה שאחר הצהריים הילדים היו הולכים ללמוד תורה. הקהילה דאגה לכל עניי העיר. אני זוכר את היום שהכל השתנה. אני הייתי כבר בן 11, אז אני זוכר. היה פרוגרום שנהרגו ונשרפו בתי כנסת, וכמה מאות יהודים נרצחו, ושמו אותם על אבבים כאלו בשר, וכתבו בשר קשה. יום אחד אבא קיבל צו, שהוא נקרא למחנה עבודה כפייה. אני זוכר את הפרידה, הייתה פרידה לא קלה, בכינו, שבר שקשה לתאר. בגיל 13 נהייתי לראש המשפחה. שהייתי דואג גם לאוכל, בגיל 14 לקחו אותי למחנה עבודה, בכוח הפריד אותי מאמא שלי. הגענו למחנה כתוביה באיזו כפר, התנאים היו קשים ועבודה קשה. אם אתה לא השלמת את העבודה שנתנו לך, והם נותנים לו עם מקל מכות. במחנה הזה היינו כולם רעבים, כל יום זה היה קשה יותר מהיום הקודם. אני זוכר את היום שבו נגמרה המלחמה. ואז כולם היו שמחים וברחנו כולנו יחד והלכנו ברגל מרחק של מעל 100 קילומטר. מצאתי את אמא שלי במרתף אצל משפחה שהייתה באותה עיר. המפגש של אמא זה היה מרגש בבכי ובצעקות. לחבק את אמא, מה יכול להיות יותר טוב מזה? אחרי המלחמה הצטרפתי לתנועת בני עקיבא ורציתי להיות גם אני בין האלו שעולים לארץ ישראל. עליתי לארץ ב-52. כשאתה מגיע באר שבע בעיר האבות, אז זה פשוט מרגש שחלום של אלפי שנים של עם ישראל מתגשם בימינו. אני הייתי אחד ממקימי הסניף של בנק המזרחי בבאר שבע. אני הקמתי בית כנסת תרומה בבאר שבע. באחד הימים ילד עבר ברחוב, זרק אבן ושבר משאב בבית כנסת. הלכתי למחרת היום לבית ספר למורה של הכיתה. המורה אומרת, סלח לי אדוני, אבל מה זה תרומה? אחר כך הבנתי שגם אחרים לא לומדים, לא יודעים מה זה. הקמתי בקומה השנייה מוזיאון על שם קדושי תרומה, שפועל גם עד היום. אני בן 95. היום, ברוך השם, אני סבא גאה. יש לנו 5 ילדים, 17 נכדים ו3 נינים שיחיו. אין בעל הנס רואה את האנשים.
תעלה המשואה.
Let the torch be lit.
משואה שישית.
The sixth torch will be lit by Gad Partuk, Nabel, Tunisia.
אני יליד טוניסיה בתחילת שנת 1931 בעיר נבל, ובית שלי היה בית מיושר. ביום שבת, אחרי תפילת שבת, דפיקה בדלת. נכנס קצין צרפתי, ואז הקצין אומר לאבא שלי, אתה עוסק במסחר של שוק שחור. אבא שלי הבין שאם יכיר אותו בתור יהודי, רק יהיה לו צרות. לכן אנחנו הגענו לעממיף. הגרמנים נכנסו לעיר עממיף שלנו. אבא ביקש לא לצאת מהבית, ואל תגידו שאתם יהודים. אבא התחפש כערבים, כאילו שאנחנו היינו כערבים. אנחנו פחדנו כבר מהגרמנים בפחד מוות, שיבואו וירינו עלינו ויהרגו אותנו. הגרמנים, כל מי שלא התייצב, לקחו אותו לאחור במקום מול אישו וילדיו, כדור בראש, וזה נגמר העניין. ואותו בית נשרף. ואבא שלי לקח את אח שלי פרזי וויקטור, והוא הלביש אותם בג'לביה הערבית, ונסע איתם לעיר גאבס. ואז התחילה תקופה מאוד מאוד קשה. היינו רעבים עד מוות. חיפשתי אוכל בפחים, כי אכלנו אך ורק מרק מבושל עם חתיכות של דברים רקובים. יום אחד המלחמה נגמרה. ב-1948 אני עולה ארצה, הרגשה של האושר. הרגשתי כאילו חזרתי הביתה. ואז יצאנו כקבוצת חלוץ להקים את קיבוץ כרמיה. אני הולך לעבוד באדמה. אני הולך לזרוע ולקצור. את כל מה שחלמתי אמרתי לו לי. ואז הכרתי את מונה. מונה ואני היינו חיים יחד 62 שנה. היום אני אדם מיושר. יש לי 4 ילדים, 13 נכדים ו8 נינים שירבו. אני מעולם לא התייאשתי. ככה זה אנחנו. חוזרים לעצמנו. עם חזק. עם ישראל חי.
תעלה.
Let the torch be lit. Mrs. Eva Erben, born in Decin, Czechoslovakia, will now speak on behalf of the Holocaust survivors. Following the German occupation, her family's home and belongings were confiscated. In December 1941, Eva and her parents were deported to the Theresienstadt ghetto. In October 1944, her father was deported to Auschwitz, and shortly after, Eva and her mother were also deported. Several months later, they were forced on a death march during which Eva's mother died in her arms and was buried in a mass grave. One morning, Eva found herself alone. With her last strength, she reached the home of the Jan family, where she found shelter until the end of the war. After the war, Eva was transferred to an orphanage in Prague, studied nursing, got married, and made Aliyah with her late husband. The couple settled in Ashkelon and were blessed with a large family. Rambam Hospital, 1949, the maternity ward, a large hall filled with many beds. In every bed, mothers and newborns surrounded by joyful, excited family members holding and embracing them. And in the center of the room, one mother lying alone. No one comes to visit her or her newborn daughter. They are all alone. No grandfather, no grandmother to greet the new baby. That mother was me. I was the only one left from my entire family. They were all murdered. And on the day of liberation from Nazi Germany, while those around me rejoiced and celebrated, I was sad. Throughout all the years of the war, in Prague, in Theresienstadt, in Auschwitz, in Gross-Rosen, and on the death march, I clung to life and to hope that once the war ended, life would return to what it had been. And the war did come to an end. But everything was different. Nothing could ever return to the way it was. These hopes became a vanished dream. My joy at being freed was overshadowed by conflicting emotions. On one hand, the war was finally over, something I had longed for years. And on the other hand, the reality of my life standing before me in those moments made me feel that I was just a 15-year-old girl, alone and without support, responsible for my own fate. My mother had died in my arms on the death march, and my father was murdered in Dachau. I felt like a wildflower, and inside me, I held a world of feelings and memories I couldn't share. On the evening of the declaration of the State of Israel, I met Peter. He brought me back to life. We got married, and together we decided to make Aliyah to the home of the Jewish people, the State of Israel, in order to secure a safe future for generations to come. I remember the two of us standing on the deck of the ship, gazing at the Carmel Mountains, and Peter held me close and promised, "I will build our home here, and we will raise children who will never have to endure what we have been through." We built our home in Ashkelon. I worked as a public nurse for new Olim in the Lachish region, and Peter worked in a factory that produced irrigation pipes for the Negev. I am the voice of the past, standing before you today as living proof that even from the depths